You know, no particular story comes to mind, but I will say that there was something about the experience that he enjoyed very much. It was something that affected his life very much. He was a guy that his dad passed away at a very young age, and he was 12. And basketball was everything to him. It ended up leading to him getting an education. And the values that I learned growing up from him always came in basketball context, whether it was about defense or teamwork or playing by the rules or he had a great respect for the game and for sports and how it affected all phases of our life. It didn't come up as I was growing up, but I know that there's been back in the mid-90s, people became aware of it when the exhibit was part of the Holocaust Museum exhibit that they put together about the 1936 Olympics. I saw him interviewed. I've heard him talk about it, and I've read a lot about what he about the experience, especially when the team was on it a couple of years ago. One of the things that I remember talking to him about at the time, which hasn't come up in some of the things I've read, was the concept of fear. He's a 21-year-old guy whose life was about basketball and being a college basketball star. Growing up in a Jewish community, and at the time, nobody knew what was going on in Germany. There was no internet, there was no Skype, there was no cell phones, there was no TV news that was broadcasting shows on the nightly news. I mean, it was all word of mouth. It was all people, a friend of a friend, a relative of a friend. People were disappearing. People weren't heard from for years. They didn't know where family members were. People were dying. They were being shipped off to concentration camps, and it was all word of mouth stories. And I remember what he said to me was that when he would go home and would talk to his mom and his grandfather at the time was living with him, was that they were scared about what was going to happen for him. They didn't have security like they have now. And they knew that there were Nazis and Jews in the same place, and that wasn't working out very well for the Jews. And therefore, there was an element of actual physical safety that was real. And, so there was no way he was going. That's what he said. There was just no way he was going. You know, he played 65 years ago, and the fact that, you know, at this stage in time, that there is an institution in downtown Brooklyn that's choosing to put his plaque on the wall and to remember the efforts that he made on behalf of the institution is thrilling. I mean, I'm 62, so I know that you know, at this stage in your life, to have people, to have that sense of continuity, that memories, and to read the articles about the games and the winning streaks. I mean, it's very exciting. It's very special. He would be the grin that I can see him when he would be shooting set shots from the driveway in our house, and they would all be going in, or when he would see his daughter playing ball, or I'm sorry, I didn't mean his daughter. I meant his granddaughter playing basketball. His daughter wasn't a basketball player, but to see my daughter playing, I mean, he would have that grin would be huge in his face.
The gentleman we're honoring tonight, I had the great pleasure of meeting about 15 years ago when he lived on the Upper West Side. Unfortunately, he has since passed. But let me tell you a little bit about him and more about the type of person he was. Yeah, he was a great player. He was one of the leading scorers in New York City every year. He was one of the Blackbirds' leading scorers every year. Let's forget about that for a second, and let's talk about who he was as a man. Back in those days, what the Olympics used to do, they wouldn't select, oh, let's take a player from Duke, a player from North Carolina, a player from Kansas, let's form our Olympic team. What they would do, and please correct me if I'm wrong when you come up, what they would do is they would take teams to the Olympic trials, and since LIU was the best team in the country, arguably, the LIU team would be competing in the Olympic trials. Now, this was 1936 in Berlin, Germany, and the team voted, and it was a majority vote, and they voted to boycott the 1936 Olympic Games. This was unheard of in Olympic history. Now it happened in 1980 when, we boycotted the games in Moscow, and then in 1984, Russia, the Soviet Union, boycotted the games in LA. But this happened in 1936, and one of the gentlemen on that team who we're honoring tonight was one of the men who voted to boycott those Olympics, which took a lot of courage and a ton of character. And I know his family has a lot of character, and they're just, they seem so thrilled to have their father and their grandfather to go into the Hall of Fame individually. 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, I should say, the 1935-36 men's basketball team was inducted into the National Jewish Sports Hall of Fame, and I was honored to be there. And tonight, Mr. Leo Merson is going to be inducted individually into the LIU Brooklyn Athletics Hall of Fame. And representing him tonight is his family and his daughter Melissa and his son Mark would like to say a few words on Leo's behalf. So Melissa and Mark. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Greg. Those lovely words. Thank you. If my dad were here tonight, he would be very, very old. But he would still be happy as ever. He would want to thank his teammates, Julie Bender and Benny Kramer, Kenny Norton. These are the guys that I remember knowing and knew growing up. He would want to thank Hillhouse. Hillhouse was 6'6", 6'7", and anybody here that's ever played on a coached on a basketball team will know that it's always important to thank the guy that's 6'6" or 6'7", because he's playing with you, not against you. And he would want to thank his coach, Claire B. My dad's dad died when he was 12. So Claire B. was the closest thing that I know that Dad really had to a father. And a lot of what I learned about from my father, I feel I learned, that he learned from his coach. And so everything that he learned and I learned about, and we learned about teamwork, and about following the rules, and about playing defense, and about playing as hard as you can, that came from my dad, and he would be thanking his coach for helping him do that. He would thank his friend, Billy Price. Billy Price was the manager in the team, and the night that they were in the garden playing, and they were warming up, and they announced the starting lineups, and it came time for my dad to pull off his warm-up suits, and he forgot to put his shorts on. And so Billy Price was able to run into the locker room and make sure that my dad didn't have to play in his jockstrap that night. He would thank our Grandma Ida, who brought him and his brother and his two sisters up, running a grocery store downstairs from the small apartment they had in Brooklyn, and helping them survive through some very difficult times in their life. He would thank my sister Melissa, who along with Greg and Jerry and the other people here at LIU have done such a great job at keeping his story alive and of making us happy to be here today. He would have to thank Grandma Paula, his wife, because you just don't come here to an event like this and don't thank Grandma Paula. I mean, she deserved it, and he wouldn't have been there without her. He would thank somebody, I think, that helped him or allowed his talents for hitting set shots from a very far distance away get him to the success that he had. I often would watch him, and we would watch games together, and he would often tell me that he sure wished they had a three-point line around when he was playing. And then, of course, he would thank LIU, because here is where he got his education. Here is where he got to play basketball, which was the thing he loved doing more than anything else in the world. And here is where he met his partner in life and my mother, and this is where they both graduated from. So he would thank LIU in a huge, big way. And so I say thank you on his behalf. Thank you.
Sorry you're getting stuck with a double team tonight, but I was asked to give a history lesson. So I'm going to do a little bit of that. Some of you who were here when the team was inducted may remember I had my Olympic torch with me. That Olympic torch really was my dad's. I nominated my dad to carry the Olympic torch ahead of the 2001 Olympic Games in Salt Lake City. It was the first time when they selected him that the Olympic Committee ever acknowledged the boycott that took place here at Long Island University. And my dad passed away just before that opportunity came around, but my family, my mom and I were able to enjoy that. And the theme that year was, to light the fire within. And so my hope tonight a little bit is to tell you a couple stories and hope that I can do that for you. Because the history of Long Island University and the history of athletics at Long Island University is rich, richer beyond belief than many, many universities and schools that are much greater and much larger. And it is so important that you continue to tell these stories. My dad played basketball here 75 years ago. There were maybe 300 or 400 people, students in the school. The sweater I'm wearing tonight was my dad's basketball sweater. I'm amazed that I'm wearing a sweater, no holes. 70 years old, right? It's an incredible thing, and that he kept it, and my mom kept it all those years because it was so very precious to him. I told a few of you tonight that in 2008, when Ralph Lauren designed the Olympic uniforms for the opening ceremonies for our Olympic team in Beijing, this sweater was what they wore when they marched into the stadium. It had an Olympic patch on it, but it was modeled after the LIU basketball sweater from the 1930s. I've tried for many years to confirm one story that my dad told. As Mark, just like my brother Mark, my dad was an amazing storyteller. And he told one story that I've been trying to search the truth for probably 20 years. My dad claimed that when they built the second, I guess, Madison Square Garden, they put in glass backboards. And he claimed that he invented the box on the backboard. And I'm telling you, you can research this, and it will tell you that 10 or 20 years before that, there was a high school somewhere in Indiana. Maybe they drew a line across that kids aimed at. But there is not one single fact that I can find about how the box on the backboard was devised. And he said that when they played on the glass rim, they couldn't see the rim. And that he asked one of the custodians in the garden, would you please put a box up there or something so we can see the rim when all those people are waving behind it. Now, you know, the rim, it's a box, it's an outline of a box. Even on a kid's set, when it's just a solid backboard, there's still a box. They have regulations on the size of the box. And I noticed today that Long Island University has taken this one level farther, that in addition to the box on the backboard, you now have a red light that goes around the entire outside of the backyard. So it's another part of the history that you can contribute. Some of you may not know that the first NIT, National Invitational Tournament, that existed, the NCAA, was something that LIU participated in. There was a reporter for the World Telegram in New York who had the idea that if they stacked the basketball games, they would get more people to attend. And at the very first one, they collected $15,000 for the homeless. This was during the Depression. And you know, we think these are new ideas that we've invented today, but really these things have been going on for many, many years. My dad came in the middle of the year. He wasn't there at the beginning of his first season. You know, he worked his way into the team. He became part of the players. As my brother said, Claire B. really was his dad. His mother was such an unbelievable personality, a strong personality. I'm going to tell you a very quick story about her. I'm not sure everyone even in my family knows this story. My grandmother came from Russia. She met a guy from her hometown, and they got married. Her husband had severe allergies. He wasn't able to work in a lot of the factories that a lot of the other folks were from where he came from. My grandmother was an indentured servant. She was locked up in a distant relative's home on the Lower East Side of Manhattan for several years when she first came to the U.S. in order to pay off her passage. She came on a phony passport. It was a passport belonging to some distant relative that wasn't her name on it. You can't find her name in the records at Ellis Island. You can find my grandfather. He came from Hamburg in the 1890s, I think 1892. But my grandmother busted her way out of this house on the Lower East Side with another cousin she was being locked up with, and found her way to Brooklyn, where she found other members of her family. She married Merson, and they opened a grocery store in Brownsville. And my grandmother went out looking for a job. She had her first possession in this country was a sewing machine, which I still have. And she took that sewing machine, and the young women at the time would go around and try to find jobs. And my grandmother went with one of her friends. I think I still have a picture of the two of them. Went into one of these factories and knocked on the door looking for work. And they looked around, they offered him a job, and the friend was really excited. And my grandmother said, "No, I'm not going to work in this dump. This is awful. The working conditions are horrible. Nobody should be allowed to work in a place like this." You know the end of the story, right? 2 weeks later, it burned to the ground. It was the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory, which led to the formation of the American Ladies Garment Workers Union. She was a very, very strong person, and she imbued a lot of that determination in my father as well. He was the oldest of 5 kids, and his ability to put a ball through a hoop gave him a college education. That college education, like for many people today, brought his entire family off the streets, out of poverty, and built a really wonderful life for all of us. He believed always in the Olympic dream. In 1996, my husband and I were taking him and my mom on a tour of the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And after we passed a brief exhibit of the 1936 Olympic Games, my dad told us about the story of LIU and the Olympic boycott. And we had never heard it before. In all those years, we had a lit court in the backyard, Knicks in our living room growing up. My brothers played ball. I had never heard the story before. And my dad went back a year later. They took an oral history from him, and he explained the way it worked, and they asked him how the vote took place and how it worked. And he said they all went into Claire B's office, and they made a pact. And they said, if one of us votes not to go to Berlin, then none of us will go. And we will never divulge who voted, how we voted, which way anyone voted. So we don't know how many voted for it, how many voted against. The vote was unanimous because they agreed up front that no matter what that vote was, they would come out of that room with a unanimous decision, which is really quite incredible for young people at the time to have that presence of mind to do that. And they carried the secret of that vote to the grave with them, because I don't believe that there's anyone that even knows today how that vote turned out. What was remarkable at the time, not only was the team, but also the president of the university. So it wasn't just the guys that were playing basketball out there on their own. A lot of people were offended by what they did. They said, no, you should go. It's not polite to bring up this terrible thing that's going on over there. You're insulting the Germans by not going. The head of the U.S. Olympic Committee, Avery Brundage, was an anti-Semite. He wanted to go despite what was going on over there. Their strategy was that they were going to show Hitler how great the Americans were, and they were going to pretend that there were no problems. But the president of the university was the one who said, we're not going to the trials. And by the way, these trials, this tournament, 1936 was the first time ever that they contested a gold medal for basketball in the Olympic Games. So LIU not only would have won the gold medal, they were undefeated, what, something like 40 games at that point or something, but they would have won the first ever Olympic gold medal. They would have brought back here to the university. There was absolutely no question about that. But the president of the university didn't hide like some other schools that didn't participate do. One school said, well, gee, our students have part-time jobs, they can't leave their jobs, or they're taking their exams now, they can't do that. The president of LIU stood up and said, we're not going to the tournament because even if we win, we're not going to Germany. We're not going to compete for Hitler. We're not going to be a part of that. And so my dad always believed in the Olympic Games. It was a huge passion of his. He helped build a sports camp in Israel to provide opportunities for young people around the world to come and compete in Olympic-style sports. And he passed that flame on to me. And I try in everything I do to pass that on to the kids I coach. I'm pre-Title IX. I wasn't allowed to run past the half court in basketball, and I had way too much energy, so basketball wasn't my sport. But I became involved in a sport that we managed to get accepted in the Olympic Games in 2000. And I represent the United States in my Olympic organization around the world. I've done development in Africa, South America, Asia, and I see the power of sport. Whether you're in a dirt field, whether you're on a cement street in the middle of the city, whatever it is, the sport, as my dad would say, is the international language. When you're playing ball with somebody, you're not going to take a gun or a bomb or shoot them or kill them. Everyone understands the power of sport. It has the power to solve incredible amounts of the world's problems. And so for all of you who are here, especially the coaches and the administrators, understand that this is the legacy that you're carrying forward to the future generations of students that will go to school here and the young people who will come up and sit in these seats and fill these chairs and who will be in the Hall of Fame in the many, many years to come. So I thank you all again. It is a huge honor for us, or for my dad, 75 years after he was here, to be able to enjoy this experience and this moment with you. And I can't tell you what a great life my dad's experiences here at Long Island University have given to all of us and our family and to me, and the opportunities that I've had because of it. And I thank you all.